So
you can clap for lunch.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Thank you, organizers, for putting us after music and before food. Nothing challenging about that. I'm Dena Morris. I'm a member of the Music Policy Forum Board, and I don't want to brag or anything, but I think I got the best panel today to talk to y'all, and you're going to agree with me in just a few minutes. I want to start by opening with a quick review of what we've already heard this morning. So we know, I think everybody in this room understands that Seattle is a bona fide music city, and we've heard a little bit about why that is, what works about it, what doesn't work about it. We've heard a little bit from some of the people in government who are working to make sure that the infrastructure is there. And this morning, I get to talk to some people who came from a creative background, grew up as an artist or a venue wrangler, and is now working in government. And so we want to hear from you guys on what that is like. And I'm going to start with you, Mark. I'm going to pick on you a little bit. So Mark, tell me if I'm covering this all right, is a musician and a DJ and a self-described salesman. But he's also senior staff to a council member on the Denver Council. So what I want to know, when we talked to you, spoke a little bit about the two driving forces in your career. And I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about what those forces are and how you've managed that. How's that shown up in your career?
Awesome. Thank you, Dena. So music is in my DNA. My dad is still a gigging musician. He plays keyboard. I saw him for Easter talking about all of his gigs in the summer. He's like in his 70s. So all that to say, music is part of my family. And so how do I manage to find time for music? You know, I need music like a fish needs water. I think if you're a musician, you need just like any song, there's periods of frenetic pace and then there's rest periods. So, and I'm inspired by one of the Behind the Music episodes. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but somebody from, I forget the name of the group, but he just needed to take a break from music to go on a cross-country trip on a motorcycle. So I appreciate music in my life has always ebbed and flowed. And so right now, I'm certainly very passionate about being in politics because we have the Underground Music Showcase in our district. We have Levitt Pavilion, which hosts free concerts throughout the summer, and a few other small music venues that is really the backbone of the music scene in Denver. So I'm passionate about not only public policy, but being a performing musician myself. I have some DJ gigs coming up. Used to be on Jazz Odyssey, KUVO 89.3 FM in Denver. And I took my journey to Las Vegas, Nevada in 2019. My mentors said I was doing great, but I was, working for free on the radio. So I decided to go to Las Vegas to expand my horizons there. And then COVID hit. So I brought me back to Colorado. I discovered a passion for gardening because potatoes were out of stock, carrots were out of stock. So I said, if I want to have a lifestyle, I need to learn how to grow. So my journey with music has always been a winding road. I think it is for a lot of musicians, but I would say just like music, it all comes back to home base with, music being at the forefront of everything that I do.
Yeah. I mean, what I find interesting about that, Mark, is that it seems like you're sometimes ping-ponging between music and politics, but they're both always a part of your life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Julia, I want to hear from you next. So I have to make sure I get your title right. Julia Heath is Policy and Outreach Manager for the New Orleans Mayor. Is that fair? So you grew up...
My Office of Nighttime Economy, specifically.
You. Okay, I knew I wouldn't get it exactly right. You grew up professionally managing venues. You were behind the stage. You built the stage. You've done all kinds of things and in advocacy. And now you find yourself working in government. So can you talk to us, I know, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about how that mix of skills plays out for you, big picture, but also on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So before I had this job, which I've only been in for about 1.5 years, I worked mostly in live music and festivals. I didn't know anything about advocacy. I didn't know what a lobbyist was or how bills and laws worked until 2020 when I got involved with the National Independent Venue Association. I was one of the founding members there. I was the chapter president in California. That's how I really kind of learned that every single person has a voice that can make a difference. These 4 people on stage with me are really good examples of that. So COVID happened. Venues were closed. A lot happened in between. Anyway, I ended up making the jump from live venue work, live festival work, to my job in the city of New Orleans in the mayor's office. When you're working in live entertainment, there's a lot of moving pieces all at once. There's a lot of personalities in the room most of the time. Both of those are also true for all levels of government, I think. But I think that, one of the things that really helps me in my role today is just kind of understanding that people, well, first of all, that we're all people and we all crave kind of a sense of connection, and we all kind of, want to do what's good for other people for the most part. And so just kind of finding ways to tap into that when I'm having conversations with people who spend 8 hours a day sitting in City Hall. Someone up here earlier said that most people in city government, they get to their office early in the morning. They usually don't go out at night. So I, immediately took the responsibility to try to figure out ways to bring those people back into our city's nightlife, into our music venues that, they don't visit anymore. So they don't know what's really going on. They don't know what's happening with venue insurance, with, labor costs going up, with, everything, just making it really difficult to do what everyone in this room cares about. So, one of the initiatives that I started is called Off the Clock, and it's the city's official happy hour. And basically what that is it's we try to do it twice a month, but we pick a spot in the city, either a bar or a music venue, and we publicize it. It's open to any member of the public. It's also sent to everyone in the city government. And we tell everyone to come hang out. It's a place for the people of the city and the people in City Hall to kind of interface together in one of our cultural spaces. And, just that, starts conversations about, like a council member will come in and say, I had no idea that you were having problems with your neighbor next door, but now I understand, and I love being here, so let me see what I can do to help.
So you said so many things there that I want to pick up on. And one of them is that in both music and politics, sometimes there are egos in the room. Did I hear that?
Sometimes,
yeah. So that's one of the things that you feel like your skill set kind of works in both places. And that's actually, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you really have to know what motivates people, and you really have to know how to time your questions and your requests the right way. A really good friend of mine, Don Pitts, who many of you know, likes to say that, snaps to Don. He likes to say that, it just matters it can be a good idea, but it matters whose idea it is. So, for like a council member, it's a better idea coming from someone like you than maybe a bartender. And that's just because, you have a platform that speaks to people who recognize someone who wears a suit versus someone who wears, Converse and whatever.
Fair enough. Do you want to respond to that, council member?
Yeah. I think you're not wrong. I think that without buy-in from government, without the government calling something by its name and hiring staff to care about that thing, that it just never will happen. But what I have really learned is that politicians will never learn to speak artist. Artists have to learn to speak politician. And I actually, I have been, for the last 4 years, been helping teach a college-level course at the Portland State University for arts majors on how to speak policy. And I take, I work with a professor, and we take 15 artists and make them do white papers. I'm like, you're going to go make a very specific policy proposal. And actually, I want to riff even further off of that. My friend Chris Hubbard is sitting in the back over here with the Musicians Union, Local 99. In 2016, he, along with Music Portland and Vortex Magazine, came to City Hall with an idea of creating a musician loading zone program. Such an obvious idea, right? Just allow musicians to use the loading zone in front of the venue that's already there. But the big difference there was they took all the questions out of the room for me. They handed me a document that said, we want musician loading zone, and we want it right here. And here's a Google Maps picture of where that loading zone is. And here are the next 13. And I'll tell you that it took all the guesswork out of it. It made us see, obviously, this is the problem, this is the solution, and this is what the next 2 steps are. But it's worth noting that still took 12 calendar months for me to get those signs changed. The work is slow. There are always competing priorities, and the government will never prioritize our issues unless you continue to be a presence and make them see themselves in it and make them see the value beyond the niche of music. Music is not a precious little thing to hold in your hand, right? Music is always sort of lumped in with the arts, and everyone says the arts are the soul of our city. It's how we feel. It makes us good. But that also means it's always the first thing to cut. And so we need to change the dialogue on that. It's up to us to change the dialogue and start speaking what the politicians need to hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is... please introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, sorry. My name is Jamie Dunphy. I am a board member of Music Portland. I'm the chair of the Music Policy Council. I'm the host of Stumptown Soundcheck, which is a podcast and radio show about the intersection of music and public policy. And I also am very recently a elected member of the Portland City Council.
And a one-time touring musician.
I was a one-time, yeah, I spent my 20s in the back of a tour bus. I played on the Warped Tour in 2005. Like, I, had the experience. I paid my rent playing music a number of months of my life, as I think folks know.
So thank you for that. And you said something that I think is a great entree to you, Hakim, talking about how as in public service, you have to speak politician. As an artist, you have to speak artist. But if you really want the two to talk to each other effectively, you have to learn a little bit about vocabulary, communication style. And Hakim Bellamy, who's sitting immediately to my right, who is an award-winning poet and author and actor, and was the grants manager for the city of Albuquerque and now works as a legislative analyst for the New Mexico Legislature. Did I get all that right?
You got all that right.
Okay, sure.
Go, Dena.
So it's my impression that you think of yourself primarily as an artist.
True.
And
Guilty.
so as guilty as charged.
Guilty.
So as an artist who's working in politics with politicians, can you respond to the council member's point about, like, how do we speak to each other? How does that work?
Yeah, the council member had it exactly right. And also for the council member, I was like Interscope street team back in my younger days, passing out flyers and stickers in Southern New Jersey for a Warped Tour. So yes, for a Warped Tour.
Yeah.
I also got free CDs because that was the whole gig, right? You go flyer to town and you might get some free music, right? That was the job. Yeah, so I feel like to answer Dena's question, I will start with the quote, right? And then I'll actually answer the question by John F. Kennedy. Stop me if you heard this before or if you've ever been to the Kennedy Center for the Arts in Washington, D.C. He said, if more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I'm convinced the world would be a better place. And I took that literally and personally. It is a language that's not quite, for all the reasons that were said earlier today. I think Kate brought it up. Like, we're like two ships passing in the night or the daytime because the employees are up early and the artists are out late. And so how do you bridge that gap when the other world really just doesn't exist? It's just like in the blind spot. And I was talking to Mika, my homegirl, who also works for this space, about that. Like, how do you, when politicians don't understand something, they either want no parts of it because it's safer that way, and to downplay its importance, it's just safer that way. Or they might hire a consultant or somebody who does speak the language of nightlife to go do that. But then when that person is actually sitting at the table, there's like 9 opinions outweighing that one opinion of the person who actually speaks nightlife. And so there has to be a way where we aren't the only artist at the table just because we can kind of chameleon in between the two worlds, right? We're like daywalkers, just because we can do that, because you're still kind of tokenized at the table unless you can really make it, speak, right? That's what Julia was saying, really make it speak to the interests of decision makers in the room. And I don't know that I figured that out. I tried to kind of move back from the sideline. When I worked for the mayor, it was like cabinet level, like everybody around the table, give me your best ideas and then leave and I'll decide. And that wasn't working so well for me in Albuquerque. So I said, how do I get upstream and try to get into like writing the policy around it and putting that in the hands of electeds who can actually run the policy, but really saying like, look, we've thought this through. A lot of smart people who know what I know have talked to the community about what's best and what they want, and we can give you a roadmap. All you have to do is get the votes. You don't even have to think about it at all. We've actually done the hard work for you, and I found that to be a little bit more effective, at least in New Mexico.
Yeah. Good. Councilmember, I want to come back to you. You've done a lot of different things, as we talked about, but now as an elected official, you are in it, right? And you are held accountable by the voters. I think it'd be fun for us to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on what is music policy and how do we, as non-elected people, think about it?
Yeah. This is a conversation that, honestly, I have found both the public and the elected officials have no idea about. The number of ways that our local music policy council down in Portland have started to think about supporting the broad music economy with intentional public policy is really quite broad. It's quite diverse. Historically, people think that it's mostly just grants. It's like, well, let's just put a grant fund together and put out, in Portland, we're talking about zoning code changes. We're watching music venues get shut down because triplexes are getting built poorly and quickly, and then the new neighbors start complaining about noise. So we want to change the zoning codes to make sure that if you're a 100-year-old music venue and a triplex gets built, it's the triplex's job to noise-proof to the existing standards. We want to expand musician loading zones to make sure that if a musician has a gig where they're going to make $25, they don't get a $50 parking ticket because they double parked to unload their drum kit, right? We want to think about economic development. I want to talk about public space activation. Portland is in the middle of as most cities are, we're in a homelessness crisis. We're in a housing crisis broadly. We have our fentanyl addiction situation is terrible. And post-COVID, the crowds have not come back. People have not come back to the public square. The last time the government told any of you about your neighbors, it was during COVID, and we said, your neighbors are sick, stay away from them. And we've never gotten that intentional invitation back. I talk about music as public safety and economic development. I talk about it as jobs. I say that there's no amount of police that will drive up and down any major, business corridor at 2 a.m. that will have the same effect on public safety as a concert getting out and people being in the public sphere. We have to change the paradigm. That's the dynamic. Yeah. So it's, and as I believe Kate said earlier, data is policy. If you don't have the data, if you don't have the dollars, if you can't demonstrate what the actual numbers are here, you're just going to get a polite shake of the head, and then you're going to be patted on the head and walked out the door. We did the Oregon music census and demonstrated that in Portland alone, it's a $3 billion music industry. That in Oregon, the music industry is bigger than cannabis, it's bigger than salmon, and it's bigger than timber. If you have those numbers and you have that data and you can say it's jobs, it's activation, it's tourism, it's economic development, it's small business support, then suddenly politicians will actually understand what the hell you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. Julia, you made a similar point when we talked about having someone in the room who actually knows how venues work. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I would say that I spend probably 60% of my time explaining how music works and what venues do, what musicians do. One of the things that clicked for me really immediately when I first started working for the city is that music venues operate in what legislators see as the gray area most of the time. They're not quite a bar, they're not a restaurant, they're not a nightclub, they're not a performing arts center. What are they? And unfortunately, that usually means that legislators, policymakers think that they're bad, they're wrong, they're doing something that's damaging just because they don't fit into one of these policy boxes. Mm-hmm. So, I'm able to explain to people like the director of our Office of Economic Development, just because this bar is asking to serve alcohol after 2 a.m. doesn't mean that it's just going to be a building full of people that are looking to get trashed. Like, they actually just want to keep their doors open because their margins rely on the sales at the bar. The profit margin of an independent music venue, especially a small one, is excruciatingly small. It's 5% on a good day, and that money comes from the bar. So being able to kind of explain things like that is really eye-opening. And I think that, that's one of the things that I challenge myself and everyone in this room to kind of continue to explore is how can we do better storytelling and create a narrative around what we all do that speaks the language of politicians like we've been talking about on this stage, because it's really something that, they don't understand. I mean, working in a venue, people would knock on the door at 10 a.m. and be surprised that someone would come and answer because they're like, oh, I didn't know that anyone was here during the day. And like, you think that we just like open our doors at 6 p.m. and a band shows up and it all just works out? Like, no, this is an around the clock thing. So, I hope that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mr. Dunphy spoke a little bit about talking about music in terms of economic development, public safety. You talked a little bit about having the value of someone who understands how venues work. So Mark, I want to put you on the spot here because, you've been in government, then you've been away, but something keeps pulling you back. And I wonder if you can speak to that in light of what we just heard here. What brings you back, and how do you bring your insight as someone who also plays music to the work that you do at the council?
Awesome, thank you. So I'm inspired by an album title from Albert Ayler, who says, music is the healing force of the universe. So for me, music is not just a nicety, it's an essential thing, just like roads. And most politicians don't see it that way. And then in the context of everything that Councilman Dunphy was saying, we need to just boil it down because our politicians, our elected officials have so much on their plate.
Right.
And I think just to be extremely concise with the needs and what the ask is, highlighting the challenges and offering solutions. And nothing is a substitute for saying $100 billion or $70 million. Certainly that will get people's attention real fast, just long enough to schedule a follow-up conversation. And then something that we've been dealing with right now in our district, which has the Underground Music Showcase running 25 years, is the mayor of Denver recently proposed to bring National Women's Soccer League to Denver, putting it in our district. It's going to activate an area that has been blighted for 20 years. And without the stadium, we're not going to have anything in this space for another potentially 20 years. So long story short, this is going to generate billions of dollars of economic activity. The city is going to bring roads to this site that will bridge neighborhoods that were historically disjointed because of redlining, racism, zoning, things of that nature. And this site is not just going to be for soccer, it's going to be for music activation. It's going to be another stage where we can highlight local acts as well as international acts and just make it a fun place where people can come together. So despite all these clear positives, some council members have been on the fence according to some media articles. Right. So I think, just in summation, making it very clear with dollars, saying the magic J word, jobs,
right.
Highlighting the other important things like connectivity of neighborhoods, inspiring people, making it a fun experience. And then also something we talked about yesterday in the intensive is leveraging traditional media to tell the narrative of what we're looking to achieve, and then highlight, by nature, it's the people who don't fall in alignment with the wishes of any initiative, they're going to kind of out themselves, and then they're going to be an outlier, and then their constituents are going to say, hey, what's up with that? Why aren't you supporting this? And then that just helps keep our public officials accountable to the wishes of the people.
Yeah.
And I think last thing, to do another quote, all the world is a stage, and we're all merely players. And I think that every Monday night city council meeting, a lot of people might say that this is a boring thing. I think if we could transform that to have the mindset of like, hey, every Monday night there's a concert going on called City Council. Let's pack this joint, and I think some big initiatives have lobbyists and have a lot of money, but in my experiences, they're just a street team, lobbyists. So we need people out here to do the canvassing, to do the community engagement, like you would be doing a concert promotion.
Here's what I hear. I hear that you love being in government. I hear enthusiasm and energy around this, which is awesome. So thank you. I also want to compliment you on your posture, Councilmember.
Yep.
Very, very well done.
I'm a giant, apparently, so now I got the kid's seat.
Hakim, I want to come back to the idea. We have a couple more minutes here. We have probably 5 or 10 minutes at the most. But I want to come back to this idea that as an artist in a political setting, you've been able to use art in ways that are maybe subtle, maybe not so subtle. One of the things that we talked about briefly, well, there are two things. One of them is the capital punishment debate, and the other was your poetry performance with the late senator. I wondered if either of those would be comfortable for you to talk about here. I think people would find them really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But before my time in any kind of governmental capacity, when I was just trying to make ends meet to raise my young son, who's now 17, and I was doing theater. And one of the first kind of major roles that I got that toured just around the state of New Mexico was about the time that New Mexico was considering abolishing the death penalty in New Mexico. Governor Richardson was still alive and still the governor at the time. And it was a little bit of dumb luck. But I think what kind of radicalized me to say, hey, I firmly believe art is how we change things. It's the most powerful force for change that humans have ever created, all that good stuff. But it was also like, and there's a guy that's going to get executed in like a month if we don't do something, right? And he doesn't have he doesn't have the time to wait for spirits and emotions to change, right? And like I was telling Dena, I don't want to take credit for abolishing the death. Obviously, that was a conversation that lawmakers had been having for a long time. But it was nice and convenient that around the same time the legislative session was meeting, and we have a citizen legislature, so they meet in January to mid-March of every year. We were also touring this play called The Exonerated. You may have seen it, but it's about 8 monologues by men, mostly of color. I think one is of a non-person of color, but that essentially did not get executed because science caught up with the times, and they were like DNA exonerated from their crimes. And so the monologues that they write, with their real life stories, were adapted for monologues. And we were just touring that play just at the right time. And more so than our acting chops, I think it was the media coverage of that play circulating, and just it happening also in Santa Fe, which is our seat of government for the state. We actually were able to get an audience, not us, but our director was able to get a little bit of FaceTime through the executive director of NM Repeal to get some FaceTime with the governor. And they brought, I can't remember his name. I know his first name was Juan, but one of the few men that were actually still alive was touring with the play to do talkbacks after the play with audiences. He and the executive director of NM Repeal got to meet with the governor, and the legislature did their job, but it still has to get to the governor's desk and get signed, right? And so they actually got some FaceTime with the governor a few days before he actually executed what eventually abolished the death penalty. So as a young poet, I was early in my career as an actor, as a poet, and it was like, wow, like that is way more immediate than my notions of how art changes things over time, right? That it's a drop on a rock over time that really creates that change. And it really kind of radicalized me and said, hey, I wonder what other things I can get into, what other good trouble I can get into that's being in the right place at the right time with the right art. So
that's well said, the drop of water on the rock. I love that. We just have to keep at it, right? Julia, I want to come back to you. I want to open this question to everybody, but I want to start with you because you said something in our prep calls that really stuck with me. And the broad question that I want to put to all of you is, what have you learned with this mix of experiences, and what do you think people here should know about the advantages or disadvantages of combining life in the creative economy with life in the public sector? And Julia, I'm picking on you because you said something about patience.
Yes, which I don't regularly have. The government moves incredibly slowly. I don't even have to say that. Everyone here knows that. But, you know, my impatience is showing right now. No, but I mean, one of the things that I would just kind of encourage everyone to think about and remember is that, like I said a few minutes ago, you know, every single person here has a voice, and it's hard to kind of think about, you know, your voice mattering, but at the right time, at the right place, in the right setting, it does. And just because you feel helpless doesn't mean that you can't go to a city council meeting, doesn't mean you can't, you know, stop by your local council member's office and find your ally and really make a bond there. It just takes one champion in music in your local government to really kind of start creating some ripples and waves and momentum. All of that being said, it takes time. We've heard a couple different stories on this stage today about, you know, how long it took to do something that is just, you know, a no-brainer, you know, like, for example, like Scott and the musician parking that they have going on here. Why did it take so long? You know, Portland, the musician loading, why did it take so long? I could tell you, but you don't want to hear because it's really boring and frustrating. But so patience is important, and I'm still working on that every day.
So that's something you have to bring with you when you go into public service or cultivate.
You do. And I will say it's not for everybody. But if you have it in you to kind of bring your passion about music or whatever it is that drives you every day, if you have it in you to bring that into government and kind of fight for the future of what you love, please, please, please do. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a job doing it, but you can start an advocacy group. You can, you know, be a confidant to one of your local legislators.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's an excellent lead in, because I was thinking, Mark, about something you talked about, which was, let's see, I don't want to misstate it, but it was something about there's the real person and then there's the onstage person. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned in that regard.
Yeah, I shared that because I used to be a security guard at the Fillmore in Denver while I was working on, you know, my dreams of being a DJ, which I still am. And I was doing security for the Marilyn Manson show. And I was like kind of dreading this because of like all the, you know, persona that he brings, all the controversy, and all that was kind of dispelled when I got to see him behind stage as he was about to walk on for his performance, and he was like giving high fives, and he's very happy and upbeat. And I was like, oh, he's a different person behind the curtain than when he is on stage. And as soon as he came on stage, yep, Marilyn Manson came out, and the most bizarre antics came out. And that's like a lot in politics as well. Our politicians are people when they're not on the dais, when they're not, you know, in front of cameras. They're mothers and fathers and daughters and just community members. And so they love music. I'm very grateful for my council member. She is into improv theater. She was doing that before she took office, and that's something that she's looking to get back into now that we're like figuring out our inter-office operations. And just like music, you know, performance is in her DNA, like something that we need to do as self-expression. And so just always being mindful of that. And one thing I was thinking about recently is like, they call it political sciences, but I think there's a high degree of political arts as well. You know, there's an art, persuasion is an art. And I think, you know, when you have your game plan ready to go, that's cool. But just like jazz, you know, you can improv when you have structure. And I think just having the why we are in office, just like a musician, we do what we do because we want to help people. We want to make change, and music is a great platform for that. And so is being an elected official.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilmember Dunphy, we need to give you another shot at this. So what do you think people here should know about moving creative and governance together?
Yeah, I will reemphasize patience. It is so unfortunate, but it is absolutely the key to success. You have to have identified what does success look like and be unwilling to give up on what that is. It will take time. There is always something that is going to be a bright, shiny, distracting object for the day. And even when you've defined what success looks like, it's going to take time. I like to break down, this is not necessarily a political science theory, but I think that there is a difference between activists and advocates, and they each have a role. And neither of us, and we can be both at different times, but there's a different role, right? For me, an activist is the person who has the personal experience and the passion to show up and hold a sign out front and say, no Live Nation venue in Portland, right? The advocate's job is the one who organizes the party. And they're also the ones who's having the conversations with the city council people on the backside. And they're also the ones who are helping to figure out what does success look like. You don't need to be policy experts to affect change, but you have to find the people who do know how those things work and define success and run at it as hard as you can. I want to give just a very brief example of that patience again. Portland's Music Policy Council, we identified during the summer of George Floyd, we identified that the city of Portland had 2 noise codes, and one of them was a pretty much textbook definition of systemic racism. It was a subjective, plainly audible standard for police to show up to a music venue, decide something is too loud, and shut it all down without any recourse for the musicians, for the fans, for the booking agents, for the venues. And it was leading to direct adverse account. And if you looked at the data, bass and drum heavy music enjoyed by Black and brown audiences was overwhelmingly shut down with no record in the system. We went to city council and said, hey, here's a really easy one. This is an obvious win for the city council. Remove this racist piece of police code. The police can enforce Title 18, the noise code. They have all the tools they need. We don't need this. 4 years went by. Every politician we talked to said they loved the idea. They're ready to support it, and none of them picked it up. And honestly, I got so frustrated I just ran for office myself to do it. And it was the first piece of legislation that I introduced, and it received a unanimous vote out of our committee, and I'll be voting on it in 2 weeks here to finally get rid of this. So, patience.
Beautiful.
Also run for office.
Also run for office. I love that. Okay, Hakim, take us out. I think I'm getting a death stare from the boss, so.
I'll try to be. I think. Is he staring at you or me?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're in trouble.
Yeah. I'm just going to riff off of exactly everything that was said. Thank you, Councilmember. That I think that artists, it's weird because being an artist, you kind of make your identity on standing out. So you become a de facto leader. And you want a following, but you don't want to be a leader, right? And so I think that how I got, into government was that, oftentimes artists starting out have to organize their own stuff. So you're an organizer by nature, right? You got to pass out flyers, you got to get people on board, you got your little teams, and then eventually you get to work with other artists and you're all complaining about the same thing, and you're like, someone should do something, and then they elect one of you to do something informally, and then before you know it, you're up here on this stage on this panel, right? And so I think leaning into that is what the council member is asking us to do, to not wait for the change that we might just have to go make ourselves. I appreciate what Mark was saying about music or art, but music specifically as infrastructure. Like, it's roads, it is infrastructure, it's cultural infrastructure, it's spiritual freaking infrastructure, right? That's what the arts is, and why wouldn't we invest in that for all of the other good reasons? Like, yes, jobs, yes, development, and professional development, specifically for our youngsters, because you're not getting alcohol and bar money, but investing in them and their futures as musicians, or as production specialists and all these other things, all that is great. And all those things are things that we need to be saying to speak the language of power and of politics. But it's also just the glue that makes us hang out. It's the thing that you're doing with your family. It's the thing that you're doing with your friends. And that's equally important. And that's not necessarily currency, but sometimes things are just more important than currency. And how do we make that case collectively to the people who are making decisions?
Can't say it any better. Thank you. Thanks.